What's good, friends? List episode 71 of the Game Pass Gamecast coming at you. The hype is palpable, the anticipation is high, and everyone is geared up and ready for the launch of the Xbox Series X and S next week. Reviews have begun to pour in, and we finally have a good sense of what to expect from Microsoft's next-gen offerings. So, this week, we comb through and examine a plethora of reviews regarding the Xbox Series X and S, and break down just what the critics are saying. Everything from the final build quality and the heat of the system, to its performance under pressure, to how the launch library finally looks, we try to set the scene if you're planning on getting in on the next-gen fun starting on Tuesday. Plus, we've got new details regarding Bethesda's Starfield right from Todd Howard himself, all of the entertainment apps coming to the Xbox series of systems at launch, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War's actual file size, and much, much more. So, buckle up and get ready for your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast.
Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and, of course, conversations around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So, be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, wherever you get a podcast at, and follow us on Twitter at GC Podcast, stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games alike, and our dope giveaways, which we have a really dope giveaway going on right now. You can win a brand new, fresh copy of Cyberpunk 2077. When it eventually comes out, you'll get a copy on us. You get entered on that, with that, whatever you want to call it, over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast, as we just said. It's the pinned tweet. Go over there, check that out. Get yourself entered to win a copy of Cyberpunk 2077. But anyways, after all that, all the rigmarole, I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, the dynamic duo, Mike P-Pack. Mike, as always, what's good? What's going on? And what have you been playing, man? What's been going on in the world of Mike P-Pack in this? Obviously, don't want to talk too much politics, but obviously, us as U.S. citizens, we have a broad range of listeners. Obviously been a bit of a crazy week in the U.S. to a degree.
That's saying the least.
I don't want to obviously control the conversation about that stuff on this. I want this to be a place where, hey, obviously we could talk about those things if it's obviously applicable and whatnot, but video games, obviously, I want this to be that safe space. I guess people can come to block out all of that and, ignore all the bullshit and whatever. But in this crazy world that we're living in right now for the past week, what's been going on in the world of Mike P-Pack, and what have you been playing, man?
Well, I've done it. I've fully relapsed.
The crack pipe? Are you talking about?
Yeah.
He installed it.
It's installed and I've been playing. I think I have like 30 hours played the past week and a half or something.
Well, that's not too bad.
Maybe not CS completely because I have been playing Age of Empires also, but yeah, CS has been heavy in the rotation, and I'm in the process of installing Apex because I wanted to give Season 7 a go. And since it's on Steam now, instead of fucking dumbass EA Origin, I can actually play it.
Exactly.
So I'm excited about that, to give that another shot. But that's pretty much, what I've been doing is a lot of CS and still some Halo.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, that's been my biggest hurdle with Apex. Like, when you, Adam, me, whoever in our friend group will hop on and play Apex, I have a great time. Like, it's not obviously something I try to sink my teeth into 24/7, but anytime I play it, it's a fun battle royale game. It's one of those games that is easy to, kind of like what we talk about all the time with games like Warzone and even PUBG and things like that, to where somebody can, when you can play a duos, trios, quads, anything like that, jump in with a group of friends that everyone doesn't need to necessarily be, somebody who's just fucking knocking tallies, like getting a bunch of kills, anything like that. Like, people can play roles within the game that necessarily can fit a casual player's perspective, but one thing that has always kept me from playing that fucking game is just using EA Origin or whatever it's called. Like, I just don't want to use it. and I'm not one of those people that are like super like, oh, I'm just not going to play it because it's on Epic and it's not on Steam. Like, it is what it is. Like, I'll play stuff wherever, but man, it's just something about that EA fucking launcher that that is the one I really do not want to touch, like, at all. Like, I've wanted to go back and replay Jedi Fallen Order on PC, a game that I adored last year. It was my game of the year last year on console when I played it, but want to go back and play it on PC, and you can get it for a steal now, pretty much on, like, on third-party websites and things like that for, like, anywhere between $15 to $30, which I'm cool with double dipping on playing for that game because I fucking love it so much. But it's always like, no, it's a code for Origin. I'm like, it's a code not for me then. I'm not fucking jumping in on that. But no, that's good. I mean, like, I know you call that the crack pipe, but like, it's a game that I fucking, always have installed on my computer. I had 20 minutes the other day in between like cooking dinner and waiting for my fiance to get out of the shower to eat together, like, that, I was like, fuck it, I'll hop in and just fuck around in casual and just, fuck around. It's just a game that, like, for me, I could pop in and out. Granted, I never get, like, my shot is god-awful until maybe about, like, 10 hours in, then it finds that, like, rhythm again. But on my end, just like I was saying last week, playing Fallout 4, going back through, I'm trying to 100% that game, and I'm doing it, like, based on a guide, like, hey, play these quests in this specific order so that you can basically get all endings or, all faction quest lines completed in one go, and that's, hey, you gotta have 2 or 3 different manual saves with that or whatnot, but trying to go through and just one of those games that, like, I like I said last week, I think gets a bad rep. I think it gets, a lot of flack. A game that I know you said you, like, felt very, not disappointed, but maybe not even discouraged, like, but just felt a little betrayed, I guess, by coming in off of, hey, I loved Fallout 3, I loved Oblivion. Skyrim kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, but you know what? They'll bounce back with the next one, and then you putting in, whatever it was, 40, 50 hours into your playthrough, and then just dipping and never touching it again, right?
Yeah, like, I never completed the main quest line, and it's still just sitting there, like, still never played. Like, just still never finished it. It's still sitting there. Fallout 4, I have 35.3 hours. I did that all in 1 week, and I just never played it again.
Yeah, to me, it's a game that maybe I like that it's a little more linear than 3, but at the same time, I do still connect more with 3 and New Vegas even. But
I really like New Vegas, but it just depends on what exactly you're looking for.
No, definitely. But that's been kind of gobbling up my time because that's if I want to get the 100% and try to get all the achievements / trophies, I want to go through and do all of that and have an actual 100% on my, profile and whatnot. It's going to take around like 50 hours. And I wanted that to be like my cap to this generation. Like, hey, a big game that I never thought I'd go through and actually 100%. Like, I want to have that kind of on there to kind of just cap off the end of the generation with. But we'll see if I get there with it. Next gen consoles, obviously, next week. That's going to be a lot of what we talk about on the show this week, obviously. So with that being said, Mike, since that's kind of it on our end, we were kind of sticking status quo for this week. And like I said I think I'm in mostly like a holding spot just because I know next gen's right around the corner. There's games I want to play, the new Yakuza, Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There's so much that's coming in such a short amount of time, but previously, like, it's that like 2 or 3 week window where it's like, I don't want to necessarily start something completely new where it's like, I know other things are going to be biding my time that, cool. If I stop playing Fallout, I fucking played Fallout through already multiple times. So it's like, I'm not missing anything. But with that being said, Mike, let's head into Button Mash because we got a fucking jam-packed news show today and just topical show. It's going to be pretty beefy. So let's head into Button Mash where we go through the quick hit stuff, that kind of circle out the week before we head into our big topics for this week. Starting out with Star Wars Squadron developer EA Motive has confirmed that while it is working on, quote, something pretty special, it is not a new Star Wars project. EA Motive took to Twitter to put a stop to some speculation that its next game would in fact take place, much like Star Wars Squadrons in the galaxy far, far away. Quote, due to human error, hey, it happens, we've seen a lot of speculation, EA Motive wrote. While we're not working on a new Star Wars project, we are working on something pretty special. Follow us here to check back for more info to know what's up. Obviously, this wouldn't be an episode of GPGC without us talking about fucking Bethesda and Starfield and Elder Scrolls, because I'm just a fucking stan for them, I guess, at this point. But Todd Howard has mentioned a few new details regarding Starfield, including a new interview. They include confirming the game will be completely single player. A lot of people were worried that it would have multiplayer kind of jammed into it, like Fallout 76 and different things like that. But it's completely single player, at least as of now. It will have a focus on procedural generation during level design, which, it's confirmed for both Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6, but that doesn't mean each world will be completely different, a la like a No Man's Sky or something like that, where it's procedurally generated worlds. It's more as though a tool for the engine that they're making that developers can use to make, denser landmass, more wooded areas, things like that make the world a little bit more immersive, which is good to hear. I'm happy to hear something like that, but everyone's game will quote-unquote be the same. You will have the same layout, same cities, things like that. They'll just be much more intricate when making them. He also cited that the Creation engine, which was the engine built for basically a modified version of the Gamebryo engine that Oblivion was made on in Fallout 3, the Creation engine got a complete overhaul that was used for Skyrim, Fallout 4, and I believe Fallout 76 used it? I think so. But it's gotten a complete overhaul, its biggest yet, including new rendering, animations, AI, things like that. It's all been upgraded, all improved. And the game is viewed as a bigger jump than Morrowind to Oblivion, which is saying a lot. But unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be waiting a while to see it. Todd cited that obviously delays and such play into it. They typically, in general, play the stuff pretty close to the chest. They don't like to show anything until the last exact moment, but he doesn't want to show anything too early. But they did say the same thing like a year before Fallout 4 release, so kind of chew on that. Think about that. Following that up with Starfield, some more Starfield news, of course. A t-shirt worn by a Bethesda employee seemingly confirmed a series of Starfield leaks that made their way onto the internet this year. This was spotted by a Reddit user, Rynend Rend, I think I'm saying that right, Reddit user. Bethesda Game Studio Managing Director Ashley Chang was seen sporting a Starfield development t-shirt in a Develop Brighton award ceremony livestream, during which Bethesda boss Todd Howard accepted the Development Star Award. A patch-like design on Chang's shoulder depicts a planet's surface and the stars above, and has been seen in Starfield leaks over the past few months. It can mostly be seen clearly on an astronaut suit in September's Imager dump of images purporting to be a form of an early build of the game. Media apps available for the Xbox Series S and X were confirmed for launch include the following: Netflix, Disney+, HBO Max, Spotify, Twitch, YouTube, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Hulu, NBC Peacock, Vudu, Fandango Now, Sky Go, Now TV, Sky Ticket, and more. Netflix, Disney+, and Vudu will also support Dolby Vision and Atmos, which is pretty dope. Cody Bellinger, outfielder for the LA Dodgers, World Series champs LA Dodgers, is playing a character in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The Major League Baseball star did the motion capture, voice acting, and face modeling for Oda Sluggason, a character players can encounter on their journey throughout the game. Sluggason is described as a, quote, Dane with a knack for hitting rocks very, very far. In his reveal, he is shown swinging a spike club like a baseball bat, showing off his slugging skills for Eivor, the player character in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Activision has revealed the storage space requirements on consoles and PC for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. As expected, the storage space required on consoles and PC is pretty much around 100 gigs or more, naturally, with any fucking Call of Duty game anymore, and especially with Modern Warfare that is just gone completely out of control. Specific to our show, obviously, though, the file sizes are as such. Xbox One, 93 gigabytes, Xbox Series X and S at 136 gigabytes, and for PC, it's kind of split up a little bit. 125 gigabytes for the full game on Ultra Graphics, 82 gigabytes for the full game in general without the Ultra Graphics, and 35 gigabytes for multiplayer only, which is surprisingly it's a smaller footprint than I thought. As reported by ZDNet, a ransomware gang by the name of Egregor in October 2020 claimed to have obtained access to the internal networks of both Ubisoft and Crytek and stole data. Unfortunately for Ubisoft, DSauce Gaming has said that Egregor appears to have possession of the source code of Watch Dogs Legion, and has since leaked it online at the size of around 560 gigabytes, which is fucking crazy. Imagine that much, that's like an uncompressed game. That's just absolutely mind-boggling. Friday the 13th, the game will be receiving its final update this month, November of 2020, and its dedicated servers will be shut down as well. Announced by publisher Gun Interactive, Friday the 13th, the game will still be playable via peer-to-peer quick play and private matches, and database servers will remain active, which house all players' progressions and unlocks. The final patch will fix, quote, a long list of player issues, and finalized patch notes will be made available a week prior to the update going live. Furthermore, the official forums for the game will be achieved in a locked state archived in a locked state, and game social channels will be, quote, switching to a more minimal approach, keeping our social media channels active for any necessary announcements only. Ubisoft has delayed its upcoming Avatar game to 2022, shocking, just like anything involving fucking Avatar, which would make it arrive in the same year as James Cameron's Avatar 2 in theaters. As reported by GameSpot, this news was included in the same earnings call that Ubisoft revealed that Far Cry 6 and Rainbow Six Quarantine were also delayed and will now be releasing in its next fiscal year, which takes place from April 2021 to March of 2022. This new delay for the Avatar game by the Division developer Massive Entertainment was discussed in response to the delay of Avatar 2 in theaters to 2022. If that release date holds, it will arrive 13 years after the original film, which, who the fuck cares about Avatar at that point? Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics have permanently reduced the price of some of the cosmetics in Marvel's Avengers. Recently, as in-game events in Marvel's Avengers temporarily reduced the price of multiple microtransactions, including epic takedowns, legendary emotes, epic emotes, and rare emotes. After confirmation earlier this week on Twitter, the reduced prices are now permanent, even after the sale event has ended. The Dark Pictures anthology Little Hope, the newest installment from Supermassive Games, the creators of Until Dawn, one of my favorite games this generation, has a post-credit teaser for House of Ashes, the third game in the horror anthology series, and it appears to feature Sumerian mythology and star Ashley Tisdale. That's really fucking random. The new game appears to feature some form of military personnel, and it looks to take players underground to the titular House of Ashes. Since its peak at the end of August, Cyberpunk 2077 developer CD Projekt Red's share price has fallen by 25%. As reported by GamesIndustry.biz, the peak coincides with the announcement of the Witcher Monster Slayer mobile AR game. Since then, CD Projekt Red market cap has dropped by almost 2.5 billion euro, which is 2.5 billion US or 2.9 billion USD. In August 2020, the price per share was around $116. USD, obviously, and as of October 30th, it has fallen to around $84 US. And then finally, a tweet from Software about its upcoming game Elden Ring has caused fans around the world to rejoice, yet it offered no new info and simply thanked fans for all the enthusiasm and support they've shown for the dark fantasy action RPG. From Software, alongside a tweet about the newest update for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, wanted to ensure fans that Elden Ring is still on its way, and the developer truly appreciates all of the excitement surrounding the game that is being built with the help of a Song of Ice and Fire author George R.R. Martin. Quote, we also greatly appreciate all the enthusiasm and support shown for Elden Ring, our next dark fantasy action RPG. We hope you look forward to it. From Software's tweet read. So, Mike, after all of that, before we jump into our big topic for this week, which obviously I think a lot of people know what it is going to be, anything you want to run back through and talk about?
I think for me, a couple of the big stories is just like I it's such a Bethesda thing, and kudos to them to just kind of like run with the leak that happened, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And just kind of like, you know, if something's going to get leaked and it's going to be true, you might as well just start having a little bit of fun with it,
Hmm.
which is something that NetherRealm Studios has done in the past as far as like things being leaked and Ed Boon tweeting stuff. In this case, it being a T-shirt, I think that's really cool.
Hmm.
Um,
Especially
and
too, like it's funny because for so long, like, and especially this goes back to when Fallout 4, which I don't know why Fallout 4 keeps becoming a topic of conversation with us, but it's funny when Fallout 4 was first leaked, they basically cut all ties to Kotaku, who, and that's unofficial to nobody, like, Bethesda won't admit it, but, like, it's been on record from multiple people from Kotaku that, yeah, Bethesda shut them out. They pretty much blacklisted them after they were given information that was credible and that pointed to, hey, Fallout 4 is in Boston. And Bethesda was not ready to reveal that yet, so they got kind of pissed off about it, and now they blacklisted them. But it's cool. I say that because it's cool to see, like, they clearly know about these leaks that are out there. They're smart enough, and especially somebody like Ashley in that position, who is in a management position, who is, pretty higher up in terms of what's going on within that development and at a quote-unquote executive level, that whatever you're doing, the internet is going to dismantle it and figure it out. That, like you said, he knew what he was doing wearing that shirt. He knew whatever was on there could be traced back to that. That it's like,
Mhm.
you know what, cool, accept it, whatever, own it, like wear it as a badge. But no,
That's definitely like kind of how I see it also. Like it's just kind of cool for them to just roll with the punches because it's not like it's something super important that leaked or
mm-mm.
something like that ruins the game, but
I mean, we know
also
nothing about this fucking game besides it's in
right.
space.
And you know what better way to kind of expose people to it than like doing like these little, you know, under the radar release things like that. And the Cody Bellinger story is also really cool, but
Hmm.
I really just wanted to focus mainly on the Friday the 13th news.
Hmm.
Obviously that game was one that like everyone kind of when they saw the announcement for it,
Hmm.
they were expecting these huge things from that game. And I do feel like ultimately it kind of fell short of those expectations. Just because like not that it wasn't a great game or anything, but I did hear a lot of buggy stuff, and it was just something that like I do feel bad for the devs because it was a really super cool idea and
Hmm.
something that I've always like kind of kicked around the idea of like giving it a shot, and I just never really did it.
Hmm.
So maybe now that they're releasing this final patch, maybe now's the time. Like if it's for sale and I see it for sale, I'll actually pick it up and actually give it a go. But
Hmm.
obviously, I hope the devs stick around because I do feel like they had a really original, really awesome idea. I feel like maybe the execution was a little bit bungled, if you will. I do feel like it's something that just like I know it's not what they were wanting or expecting, but obviously, you know, you just kind of have to give creating games a shot. So,
Hmm.
um,
Well,
you
what
know,
was
kudos to them
nice?
for.
Go
Go ahead.
ahead. No, no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say kudos to those guys for being in it as long as they are and honoring it for a final patch and trying to not that it was a complete debacle or anything. That's not like what I'm
No,
saying at all.
absolutely.
But I'm just saying like obviously, you'd like to see you would have liked to see it probably in a better state for its lifetime, but and I'm sure
Hmm.
they would have too. But no, hopefully they stick around because I do think they have some potential, especially with their ideas that they'd be able to get something pretty special going. It's just I just feel like it was maybe they bit off a little bit more than they could chew with like the 12 player thing. Like
Hmm.
Dead by Daylight, the 4 player thing seems to work really well as far as just like generally how the game works and everything. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens, and hopefully they, keep their heads up because it's still a remarkable feat, and I'll definitely be an owner of that game at some point in time and give it a shot.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's good to see because this game, like, in Ilphonic was the developer behind that, Gun Media being the publisher, which I always get kind of flip flopped. Like, I know Ilphonic from this game, but also Ilphonic now, after developing this game for, up until 2017, famously losing the license to this game after it was already released. And, I think it was Fox who kind of think that's who it was. The kind of who owns the rights to Jason. I think that's who it is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but whoever owned the license to Jason kind of gave them shit about it after not really wanting to work with them again after it and them not following up with it, which has led to them now not really supporting the game as much anymore. But what's nice about that is it led them to now work on this Predator hunting ground game. Now they got the license from Fox to do Predator, and it's granted right now, in terms of at least console exclusivity on PlayStation, but it's on PC as well, and I'm sure we'll leave that eventually, but because it seemed like it's more timed than anything, but and that's getting much better reviews. It's in a much better state starting off. It's still some issues, but it's good to see them see a lot of the bigger holes that they had with the Friday the 13th game, and it's a very similar game, very structured very similarly, that it's good to see that they were able to take a lot of the critical feedback that they got on Jason, a lot of the learning curves that they got from Friday the 13th, and actually take the premise of that at least again, and modify it to fit into this new IP. And it's good whenever you see, like, it's great that we are in this point of gaming where licensed products are no longer just trash that they put out to make a couple of bucks to market a movie or whatever. We're actually getting good shit since Arkham Asylum came out. We've been seeing people respond to that saying, oh shit, if we actually put a little care and effort into this and actually hire a development studio and give them a budget to work with and not time crunch them in a year's time to get this game done, we might get something good out of this. So it's good to see IllFonic find life, even if it isn't with this game, moving forward and still having success now, at least in that genre still. Because I don't only mean more things like that coming out and people playing it, whether it's on console or PC. So, Mike, I think it's time to head into our big topic for this week. And of course, we're getting ready for next-gen consoles. Next-gen consoles come out next fucking week, which is fucking crazy to think that next week is the ninth generation of consoles, I think. It's absolutely just bananas to think we're at that point already. And granted, it boggles my mind that we're on episode 71 of this fucking show to begin with, too. It doesn't feel like that, but to see us talking about this last year and this feel like it was so far away up until this point that we're on the cusp of these new consoles coming out is just mind-blowing to me that it went this quick and this fast, and that we went from pretty much knowing nothing about these consoles for the most part 7 months ago, to now basically knowing everything under the sun about these. And we're going to kind of dive into that this week. I want to do really a review roundup and even some predictions at the end if we're feeling up to it of what to expect for this console generation, but mostly kind of a review roundup. I want to set expectations because while these consoles to me I'm excited to get mine. I got my confirmation that my pre-order from Amazon is going to be here on release day. Knock on wood. So hopefully next week we'll have our review that I can get some hands on with it, even dish it over to Mike to get some hands on to give it to you guys, run it through, the paces and whatnot. I'm excited to do that. So, but I really want to kind of set the expectations for this console with early adopters going in who might not have been within the Xbox ecosystem, heading into this generation. And it's in an interesting place, obviously, given Halo Infinite's delay, that I think a lot of some of this actual console's parts are going to weigh a lot heavier than maybe with Sony's console having more first-party games to kind of go off of and more bigger titles, I guess, to look at from internal studios. So I kind of want to just set the stage and it'll be kind of almost like a confirmation of our preview that we have in a way, or, depending on how some of these things go when we go through it and talk about it, maybe a little bit different. Our opinions may have evolved from that, but I kind of wanted to kick it through and just break down a handful of different reviews that we've gotten from some of the different outlets and whatnot and kind of go through them. So kicking it off here, let's start with the design. And we're going to start with the Xbox Series X. That, I think, is obviously the biggest fish out of all of them. That's what I think the majority of enthusiast level, at least from, it sounds like, our audience that we were talking to, are probably pre-ordering or have pre-ordered or intending to buy first. But we also will talk about the Xbox Series S as well, but the Xbox Series X being the quote-unquote true next-generation console, I guess, if we're looking at it that way, from a lot of people. So let's kick it off first with the review of the design of this. This comes from IGN's review by Ryan McCaffrey. As always, link in the description. I'll make sure all those are in there. Go over there, give all these guys a click and girls a click. Go over there. They'll appreciate that. Read the review. All of them are great, detailed, everything like that, yada, yada. You know what I mean. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the console design itself. It's minimalist, yes, but bold. To my eye, it's easily the best Xbox in history, when it's standing vertically at least. On its side, it looks like a giant misplaced Lego piece, and you can't remove the vertical stand on the left side, which is awkward. But when stood tall, it's big enough to confidently tower in your entertainment center while compact and subtle enough that it doesn't dominate it. The top of the Series X is something of an industrial designer's magic trick. The concave ventilation screen gives an appealing look of both depth and premium quality when viewed at eye level or higher, and the green coloring on the inside half of those ventilation holes pops with a much needed accent that makes the inside of the Series X appear to be illuminated even when it's turned off. On the front, you have the power button, a single USB 3.2 port, a 4K Blu-ray drive with an eject button, and a controller pairing button. On the back, there's an HDMI 2.1 out, 2 more USB ports, the power plug, an Ethernet port, and the internal storage expansion slot. RIP HDMI in and optical ports. I know those weren't the Xbox One's most popular features, but I miss them, especially since it means I can no longer use my trusty old Astro A40 headphones, which I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute, Mike, because I know you're an Astro guy. I won't miss fan noise, however, because there really isn't any. Kudos to Microsoft's engineering for making the Series X almost inaudibly quiet. Even playing games in 4K at 60 frames per second, this stoic ebony obelisk, I like that. That's a really good chain of words there describing that. Stoic ebony obelisk barely whispers. We measured just 40 decibels while playing Dirt 5, which sounds great next to 60 decibels for the same game on Xbox One. In the thermal department, the Series X also does very well. It's a bit cooler than the Xbox One X, registering 42.5 degrees Celsius in Dirt 5 versus 56 degrees in the same game on Xbox One. So, it seems as though the major noise and heat issues found in both current gen consoles, we're talking Xbox One / One X, S, whatever you want to call it, and the PlayStation 4 and 4 Pro, seem to be pretty much solved for the time being. Obviously, we'll hear from Sony's end about that, whenever reviews of that console start going out and yada yada, but primarily we've heard this from the Series X, and that was the big issue going into it. People didn't want fan noise. They didn't want to sound like their console was about to fucking take off. It seems like a lot of that's been solved for the time being, especially, obviously, we had some rumors about heat issues that were pretty, a lot of people didn't hold a lot of stock into it, but it was making enough noise that we felt we had no report on it, but it seems like a lot of that has subsided a little bit. But as we all know, for the most part, consoles aren't pretty modular. They're pretty, there's not much you can do to upgrade these consoles physically, outside of, storage and whatnot. But so, Mike, as the gen progresses and we see more and more demanding titles, both you and I play on PC, we know how those fans sound, and as you crank up that shit and how hot the PC can get, especially both of us having AMD processors, do you think the fan noise and heat issues could arise again as these more and more demanding titles keep pushing this system forward? Do you think this is just going to be something that kind of, hey, this is great starting out, but how's this looking 2 years, 3 years after, one, our consoles have already been, probably put through the paces as it is over these past couple years, but tack on top of that, hey, we're getting the Elder Scrolls 6, and it's in 4K 60, and it's trying to load in these dense textures and assets and things like that with its quick resume and all that thing's going to be cooking a little bit. Do you think we might run into those problems?
Yeah. I think it's going to be really dependent on your situation. So I think, with a PC, like if you have it like kind of hidden in a box and don't give it a lot of opportunities to get any airflow, then obviously you're going to have some fan issues. And I think the same can be said about, the new Xbox. Like, as games get more demanding, it's obviously going to generate more heat when you make the console work harder. I mean, that's just simple thought. But I think where you're going to really notice it at is if you do have it in your entertainment stand and there's not a lot of good airflow through there, like say it has a closed back
Mhm.
and you have it inside of a box, it's going to generally heat up a little area. It's going to create, you know, the the air is going to get hotter in there, and then it's going to have to work the fan harder. So it's really dependent on your situation, and it's going to be subjective in the way that it's just going to depend on where you live, where you have it located, things of that nature. But I do also think that they know that the Xbox One and the PlayStation, but this is an Xbox show, so I think they do know that like the Xbox One, especially mine, like the old VCR size Xbox One, like
Mhm.
it's loud. It makes a ton of heat. It's obviously, not optimized for that. So
Mhm.
it will be interesting to see how it stands. But I think everything's just going to get taxed more and more as, the graphics get better in games and stuff, which it probably should.
Mhm.
That just kind of makes sense. So that's kind of how I feel about it. But again, if you have a headset on or something, you don't really even hear it.
Mhm.
So it's not going to really bother me too much. But I guess if you're playing like in an entertainment center and you have a speaker, like a sound bar or whatever, maybe you'll be able to hear it that way. But
Mhm.
for me, pretty much anytime I'm playing video games, I have a headset on, so I can't hear it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in the same camp. At least, I mean, especially when I'm playing anything on PC. I mean, I don't even have speakers to. I actually just found out both of my monitors that are like 100, one's 144 hertz, another's 165, which was the main reasons I fucking bought them. Like, they both have speakers built into them, which I had no idea, but I never would fucking use them. I'm gonna use a headset the whole time. But same with consoles. For the most part anymore, I'm using a headset when I'm playing on console as well. But no, I totally agree. And one thing that I still find a little that I feel like I'm gonna find a little bit worrisome with this system, because unfortunately, see me personally, me playing, PC gaming, and I love fucking building computers. I love looking at, I like the RGB porn that pops out of there, like with all the lights and shit like that. Like, I like the look of a tower, and especially this basically being, a micro ATX, board inside. Almost looks like a micro ATX build. I like that aesthetic of it standing up, but with where, the room we have in our townhouse, which is pretty spacious, but overall we only have, we don't have the world's biggest entertainment center. I'm going to probably pop it, where my Xbox One X is right now, on one of the shelves, and I'm probably going to put it horizontally. What worries me about that, though, is the airflow in terms of the amount of dust that gets in there. And with that top so exposed compared to, really, I mean, like you said, I had one of the VCR Xbox Ones back in, like the launch ones back in the day, like you. Um, and that had a lot of venting on the top and sides
Hmm.
too, but it still wasn't, as I felt, at least, invasive as the Series X's on top. Like, it's
Hmm.
very, even on the Series S too, having the big look, like turntable esque look to it, and having that, circle, fan, big ass vent to it. I find that a little more worrisome in terms of the amount of dust that can get through. Now, granted, I haven't dismantled this thing. I haven't watched really too many dismantlings besides, like, hey, just a quick breakdown of how this thing's put together. It looks like, though, that it could potentially be, granted, it's probably also blowing out air too. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much it's actually going to stay in there, but if, these things are basically PCs now. And you and I both know from one, building our PCs and cleaning out our PCs and stuff, dust does fucking get in there. Dust gets sucked up
Yeah,
in there with the fans.
it's basically like I don't know what it is, but computers between like the motherboards and the rest of
Hmm.
the parts seem to be like legitimate like dust magnets. Like I don't know. Like I know there's science behind it. I know because the fans are blowing, because it's because it is a little bit of a magnetic field at times, and like
Hmm.
because it's sucking air in and stuff. I understand there's dust in the air and that's why it gets in there. But it's like alarming at how dusty your computer will get, or in this case a console will get, just simply by running, because it's just sucking air in, kicking the air out. But as it goes in and comes out, like the dust kind of clings to that unit, and it's interesting to see how much dust it gets, but it's also like almost terrifying when you
Hmm.
realize like you're breathing that air in all the time, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And definitely with a console like this that is, it flat out from on paper, with the specs that it sports compared to the PlayStation 5, and this is, just non-biased, like, because I fucking am very honest and transparent. Same with you, Mike. We play on fucking everything. We play games on everything. So, I love my Xbox just as much as my PlayStation or whatever, but Xbox is kind of the middle of the Venn diagram for all of us. That's why we have this show. But just on paper, looking at the Xbox Series X compared to the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X is the more powerful console. With that being said, though, it needs more airflow. It needs more, it needs the ability to have these consoles stay cool to a certain degree, especially when you look at the PlayStation 5, which is compromising with liquid metal for cooling, which is dope. Me being a techie, like, I fucking love that. Like, that's so cool, because that's, like, one of the first times we're getting that at a consumer grade level, really. That me seeing that, like, and knowing how powerful the Xbox Series X is, that makes me a little like, okay, well, not that I'm worried about this thing overheating right away, but if, when Halo Infinite eventually comes out, or the Elder Scrolls 6 or whatever, like, and I'm grinding on this thing for a while, like, am I eventually going to get red ringed or something like that? Am I going to have overheating issues with that? And hopefully with enough ventilation that this thing has, cool, that'll be no problem. But the amount of dust that gets in there, the amount of debris that could get in there with that, it's just much more open comparative, I think, me personally, to a lot more consoles we have. But at the same time, Microsoft's not going to want to lose money on any of this. I'm sure, put the R&D into fucking making sure this thing is, engineered right to not, like, take in a fucking Hoover vacuum amount of fucking dust or anything. Like,
Yeah.
So, one thing I did want to touch on before we kind of move on to the next article, and also too, I'm gonna kind of give the score at the end for each of these reviews that we pull. IGN, who Ryan writes for, and Ryan's great. Go over and listen to Unlocked. He's one of my favorite personalities in gaming. And really like journalist in gaming too. He does a lot of journalistic pieces and whatnot too. But his write-up was great. Go over and listen to Unlocked. They did a full breakdown as well on that, but they gave it an 8 out of 10 for great, which is pretty good, because I'll be quite honest, a lot of consoles that launch don't get great scores, because there's not a lot to it. It's just the console and a couple launch games, but an 8 is great to know. But one thing I did want to touch on too, you're an Astro guy. You have A50s, right?
I had A40s. Now I use HyperX Cloud 2s, but that's simply because I was just playing a lot of Counter-Strike when I bought these. But
you are an Astro guy.
Yeah, like if I had the disposable income and didn't mind spending $250, I would, in a heartbeat. It's just right now I just don't want to spend the money on another headset when my HyperX Cloud 2s work fine. You know what I mean?
Right. But I should say it like this, being somebody who used Astros for so long, and high-end Astros for so long, and went the optical route, how does this make you feel with this console not having, granted, optical is starting to kind of make its way out, but it's still a pretty standard option for a lot of audio, a lot of audio geeks out there who want that option to use optical. How do you feel about that, them kind of moving away from that with this?
I will be honest, a lot of people might state or feel like you are, like, Ryan or even me, like myself, would be blowing it out of proportion to make a big deal about optical being removed from the console. But I truly 100% just believe that that's because you haven't ever used it. Once you kind of go optical, it's almost like hearing surround sound for the first time, like going from stereo to surround sound. There's really no going back. And right now I've been using a studio headset for a while, because for a while in CS1 or CSGO, you didn't need a surround sound. Like, stereo was fine, like you could hear all the sounds appropriately enough. But I will say that it is sad, because the greatest thing about the Astros, especially for me, was competing in Halo. We just, like, you would daisy chain, or the best part about them was daisy chain, not splitting. Like, daisy chaining the headsets. And what that means, for those of you that might not know, or even if you have an Astro headset and you have it at home and you've never been to a LAN or never competed in a LAN event, basically what happens is you take your Astro headset mix amp, which is literally $100 piece of the headset, because the Astro headset without the mix amp is $150.
Mhm.
So it's literally $100 for the mix amp, and it's well worth it, because you have a lot of controls on there. But the bottom of it actually pulls out, and now there's like little holes, it almost looks like, exposed. And you take that thing that you pull out of the bottom of your headset and you plug it into the right side of yours and plug it into the left side of someone else's, and then you do that down the line. So when you would sit down at a Major League Gaming tournament or other major tournament, there would be a table, and it'd kind of be like one of those tables from Walmart that are like 6 or 8 feet, and in the center of your station there was all four of your headsets side by side by side. And when you sit down and you put the headset on, your inline communication is instant. Like, you hear each other. It's a 100% an inline experience. There's no latency, there's no technology issues, because as long as the mix amps are in decent shape and the daisy chains are in decent shape, you're just it's literally like you talk. There's no latency. You just hear people clearly, like they're speaking into a microphone, like just speaking into your ear, which is a huge deal in LAN events, because you need to be able to hear each other, and you need it to just work. So I
Mhm.
am sad about optical. I know that it is somewhat on its way out, but again, it's one of those things that you don't know how good it is until you tried it. Like, I'm sure this might be a bad comparison. I've never used a bidet, but I don't know. But some people who wash their asshole out with a bidet might say you don't know how good it is until you try it, and then you don't have it anymore. I
Fair.
would
I've
say
heard
that,
that
like,
as well. I've heard
I
that
would
as well.
I would say that the optical port is somewhat like a bidet. Like, you don't really know what you have until you try it and don't have it anymore. And I think that potentially the optical cord is a bit more practical than a bidet, but that's kind of how I would compare it, because like the quality. I remember the first time I ever plugged in the optical cord to try my headset, and it was just like, it's so nice compared to stereo. And then you get the full 7.1 surround sound with optical. It's like, it's next level quality. And I'm a quality junkie with audio. Like, I might not have the best headset right now, and that's simply out of necessity, but like,
Mhm.
I've already told my girlfriend that, when I move down to Virginia, like, I fully intend on spending $1,000 or more on a speaker system,
Hell
Bob
yes.
Marsh style. And I'm
Yes.
grabbing, like, we're gonna have surround sound. I'll put up soundproofing everywhere, like the soundproofing panels everywhere, and I'm buying like a super dope record player, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna have like a $1,500 to $2,000 audio setup. But that's because that's how much I care about music. That's how much I care about quality. Is like, I would spend the money on that in a heartbeat. Like, it doesn't even
Right.
phase me. Like, I want that quality. So for me, the optical cable is a huge deal, like it is with Ryan. Like, just because I've used it, and it's amazing. So
Mhm.
I am sad, but again, if they're willing to give me true LAN, that's something that I'll probably suck up. But I'm interested to hear how you're supposed to. Is it just going to be USB 3? Because I mean, cool, but it's not going to be as high quality. So I don't know, where it is. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
No, definitely, definitely. And that's what I guess to me is going to be interesting, like moving towards that, because this is the first time really. Well, did the Xbox One have optical?
Yes,
Okay, I thought so. I know the PS4 launch model did, but I think they moved away after.
they
No.
did. You have to. Yes, they did, because whenever I was going to compete in COD, you had to buy like the 500 gig version to get the optical.
Mm,
100%. That's what happened.
gotcha. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting kind of to see where audio with these systems is going to go, because I mean it seems like a lot too are built into the Dolby Atmos and stuff like that within HDMI 2.1 and stuff like that, but even then a lot of people are still using, you know, third party, ways to do that, aka a sound system, aka a headset. And like we're talking $1,000 headsets, like studio headphones people are using to play some of their games because they want that quality, and some of them are using different means like optical. So it's gonna just be interesting seeing how that kind of evolves, I guess, over time. But anyways, let's move into storage and load times. This is coming from The Verge's review by Tom Warren. We usually turn to him a lot on this show, so go over there and read Tom's review. Load times are incredibly good on the Xbox Series X, which we kind of know, compared to what we've seen on current consoles. The Xbox Series X uses a greatly improved CPU that works in tandem with the SSD to help games load faster than the current Xbox One X. I've noticed load time improvements across every game I've used on the Series X. Some are dramatically faster in terms of minutes saved waiting for a game or a level with a game to load in. Others are a few seconds saved here or there, but they all add up to more time spent playing games instead of waiting for them to load. And I've pulled up here, they have a pretty decent chart here of just some tests that they've run with load times. Kind of looking at them, some of the more drastic ones here. Destiny 2 loads on the Series X in 43 seconds compared to almost 2 minutes on the Xbox One. Oh, here's one. Sea of Thieves loads in 20 seconds on the Series X compared to almost a minute and a half on the Xbox One. What else do we got here? Red Dead 2 loads in 52 seconds compared to a minute and a half or so, which is pretty crazy. Which, the one thing I did notice, somebody was doing load times for GTA 5. And granted, you can kind of dunk on GTA 5, people being like, well, it's like a PS3, Xbox 360 game, which I agree. But granted, higher textures, better lighting and stuff on this generation's version. But the load times on it are just astronomically and insanely better. Like, it loads in, like, I think it was like 8 seconds, something like that, like around there, compared to what used to be like a minute and a half. It's absolutely insane for an open world game that big. It's just absolutely bonkers. So getting back to kind of Tom's review here, I'm used to the speedy load times from PC SSDs, but I'm still impressed with the Series X's load times. Games like Sea of Thieves and Destiny 2 load in less than half the time that they do on the Xbox One X. Even older games like GTA 5 load a lot faster than before. While the Series X comes equipped with a 1 terabyte of storage, you could also use the 802 gigabytes of it. That's actually slightly more than the 780 gigabytes of usable space on the Xbox One X, even with Microsoft reserving space for the OS and new Quick Resume feature that lets you swap between games in around 10 seconds or less. Microsoft is also using a proprietary storage expansion slot on the Xbox Series X, and so far, only Seagate has been confirmed as a partner for the $220 version of a 1 terabyte card that slots into the rear of the console. The usable space on these cards is 920 gigabytes as, once again, space is reserved for Quick Resume. Games that have been specifically updated for the Xbox Series X make use of Microsoft's new Velocity architecture to get the most performance out of the system's SSD, so you can't run them off of USB storage. The vast majority of backwards compatible games, however, do not use Velocity architecture, meaning that they can be played directly off of a USB drive, unless they, obviously get a Series X update in the future. That means a lot of the immediate load time improvements are thanks to the SSD and CPU alone. Not the new APIs Microsoft has implemented that should improve load times even more in the future. It also means that if some of your older games don't get updated for the Velocity architecture, then you could just run them freely from USB storage. You'll see plenty of load time improvements in this way, providing that you use fast USB SSD storage drives, and some may even come very close to the load times you'll see using the internal drive. So, like we said before, we obviously both play pretty regularly on PC, so we've been used to the advantage of SSDs for quite some time, and SSD technology has really been the tentpole kind of, feature set, or SSD really is the buzzword around, and load times in general is the buzz phrase around this new generation of gaming for the most part. So even though, I feel pretty confident about new games moving forward, taking advantage of the Velocity architecture that Microsoft has for its next-gen consoles, it's great to get confirmation that, the backwards compatible games that we get will just natively get improvements based on a GPU and CPU alone, a la like we do on PC. It's great that it's actually getting to the system isn't as proprietary as it traditionally was, that it's more unlocked, that it's able to take advantage of those things. So, not just with backwards compatibility, but if Microsoft pulls an Apple and forces their, approved brands on consumers for their expandable SSDs, do you see that potentially being an issue? Do you see, just in general, external storage becoming an issue, over time, really, with these consoles, given that, one, we're moving to a new type of storage overall, for the most part, with consoles, and two, and casual consumers not really being familiar with this tech, and two, just the price of SSDs right now, specifically these proprietary device or memory cards for the most part that we're putting in the back of the console. So far, they're only developed by Seagate. Is it kind of going that Apple way of, hey, you have to use this approved brand by us, and hey, it's $220 or whatever? Do you see this just becoming an issue?
Yeah, I definitely am not the biggest fan of that. It's one of the reasons why I'm like kind of considering moving away from Apple in general, just
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sick of the proprietary bullshit, and I am, kind of concerned with with Microsoft's stance here. I just don't want it to get into a situation where consumers are the ones that have to pay the price, and I do feel like that's the way it could wind up going, and it does suck because obviously you don't want that to be the case. Hopefully, it's just hard because when you corner a market this way, when there's only one developer or one manufacturer that makes these types of things, they can kind of set the price, right? And they can practice some price setting things that obviously sucks, but they're kind of at will to do it because they are in control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just hope that that's not what it gets to. I hope that this deal kind of works out for both parties, and I do think that Microsoft has enough. They're kind of rich enough to kind of strong arm Seagate out of doing that, because there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to get someone else to manufacture these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that Seagate just stays in line because of Microsoft's basically Randy Marsh. You know how Randy Marsh has the wheelbarrow with his nuts, like that's kind of Microsoft. And
Yeah.
I hope that Seagate respects that, because if they don't, they're gonna get Randy Marsh's nut. They're gonna be like Randy Marsh whenever he jizzes after watching porn for the first time in like however long he does it.
Exactly. No, I definitely see that. I kind of still stand by what I kind of looked at before. I see this being obviously a learning curve. If we're just talking about, hey, casual consumers coming in, like you, me, Adam, even Kyle, for the most part, like people who have now kind of entered the world of PC gaming, or at least familiar with tech in general, they're probably used to this technology, used to, hey, SSDs are pretty much the new wave of future memory. That's the way that we're, moving towards, hopefully, with memory, given its super fast load times comparative to traditional hard disk drives, that it's eventually just going to become second nature. It's going to become a household thing. It's going to become like almost like the, flash drives of past. Like it's just going to become that type of thing, I think. Obviously going to take a little bit of time for that to happen, but it's eventually going to get to that point, and I think we will see that in this console generation after a couple of years. And I think it's going to be one of those things that it's just like, hey, get used to it or get out of the way. Kind of like you were saying that, they're able to do that. They're able to push that. But I think it will, right off the bat, be a little bit more of a steeper learning curve, and it could be problematic for, and granted, I would have liked to see more storage in general with these with these consoles, but at the same time, if they're primarily using a 1 terabyte, they say 1 terabyte, but granted, it's more like 800 and some gigabytes of SSD, that you're able to actually use in there. That's still pretty good. That's still pretty decent, especially being SSDs, and that amount of space in an SSD is usually pretty expensive. That, I still would have liked to see a little bit more, because games are getting bigger and bigger, even with them being so compressed as it is, and trying to compress them as much as possible. Even then, though, we're getting to the point now where, you look at a Call of Duty like we talked about. It's well over 100 gigabytes. I mean, my God, the Xbox Series X version is going to be almost 200 gigabytes. I'm sure, that's going to be the console version of that game on the high-end consoles. with, ultra settings or whatever, or even on PC, like it's going to be close to 200 gigabytes. Who's going to put that on their fucking SSD and say, okay, cool, there's a fourth, if not almost a third of my space gone to one game? Like, and that's what worries me about this, that they're going to force, hey, you have to get the Seagate one. Oh, you want more, you want more storage? You buy a lot of, or you use Game Pass a lot, you download a lot of games, cool. You got to go buy our drive for it. And it's like, all right, man, like, and you're putting a, $230 price tag or whatever it is on there? Come on. Like, that, hopefully just, it seems like SSD prices are beginning to, fall a little bit, especially as they move to the M.2s compared to the traditional, SATA drives. Yeah, the bricks of them, like the little, flat pancake, versions of them. But at the same time, even those are still kind of, a little pricey. That it's hopefully, 2-3 years in, when this is all just the norm, and this generation, like most console generations, by that point, that's when we're starting to see developers fully take advantage of the tech that they've had. They've gone through the ringer with it. We're seeing some of the big tentpole games come out. Like, hopefully by that point, it is just kind of second nature. But I do think there will be a little bit of a learning curve with this, and I do see this being a little bit of a problem in the short term, more so than within the PlayStation ecosystem a little bit, because I think in general, Microsoft's Xbox is going to be just clearly much more modular, if comparative to, obviously a console is not super modular to begin with, but comparative to the PlayStation, where the emphasis is, hey, buy more expansion, do this, that I think it's going to maybe rub people even the wrong way of like, oh, well, you're pushing this on me already. Like, yeah, Game Pass, cool. Like, it's awesome. I have access to all these games, but I can only install like 6 of them. Then what? Then I got to go buy your new drive. So we'll see. I'm definitely thinking it will be a little bit of a learning curve, but I do think by, hey, year 2 we roll around, whenever, year 3 we're seeing more of the adoption rate, especially hopefully, knock on wood, that Microsoft, starts off to a good jump right off the bat. With this console generation, hopefully this just isn't, really a story anymore. And hopefully it's, people are good to go with it. But Mike, let's move into the user experience, or commonly what we kind of call it, the UI, the home screen, things like that. The user interface, what you're going to be experiencing when you're playing this game outside of just the games. The UE. The UE.
No, the GUI, the GUI, the graphical user interface.
Yes, exactly.
The GUI.
The GUI. This comes from US Gamers Review by Kat Bailey. As always, link in the description. Go over there, give Kat a click on her review, because hers is really, really good. Staying with the Xbox's, quote, faster is better theme, setup is quick and fairly painless. Much of the process is handled through the Xbox mobile app, which quickly runs you through a series of initial options, at the end of which you are encouraged to give it a name. Now, I do want to point this out. In watching some of the reviews today, and shout out to Easy Allies, Daniel Bloodworth over there, he pointed it out that you do not need to use the Xbox mobile app to set this up. You're not forced into that. You could skip that. You could fuck off with it if you want. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to use that. You could just set it up traditionally how you would set up a console. But supposedly it does make the process a little bit faster, snappier, and transferring all your stuff over is a little bit easier than that way. But just a disclaimer, if you are buying a console and you're like, fuck, I don't want to get another app just to set this up, you don't need to. Anyways, as part of the initial setup, the Xbox Series X imported all of my Xbox One settings, including all of my saved games. I found all of the past games and apps readily available in a games folder, and quickly got to downloading them. As it turns out, this would take several hours, as I don't have a single physical Xbox Series X game to my name, and modern games still take a while to download. I'd recommend starting with a couple smaller games so you have something to play while you wait. The Xbox Series X dashboard is simple but functional, ensuring all of your games, apps, and features are at most a few clicks away. Pressing the glowing Xbox button on your controller will call up a quick access menu where you can find basically everything you need. A quick rundown of all your most recent apps, Game Pass, the store, and recording options. Capturing and sharing in media has been streamlined thanks to the new button on the controller, and if you plug in an external drive, you can capture up to an hour's worth of gameplay in 4K HDR. The Xbox Series X is biggest question mark is the touted quick resume feature, which has been hyped as a way to rapidly jump between multiple games. Closing a game on the Xbox Series X will create a save state in the system's memory, after which it can be accessed by pressing the start button at the game's loading screen. Even if you opened up another game, it's a great idea, but Quick Resume is basically disabled at the moment for Xbox Series X and S optimized games, as Microsoft has identified an issue it hopes to address with a post-launch patch. Quick Resume is available for all standard backwards compatible games, but it's still kind of rough. It's still kind of a rough blow for what should be one of Xbox Series X's showcase features. Another question mark is smart delivery, which is currently supported at the whim of the publisher. The initial lineup below shows some of the features which she includes of smart delivery. The basic idea is that if you buy a game on Xbox One, you will get the upgraded next-gen version for free. All of Microsoft's games support this feature, as do major upcoming releases like Cyberpunk 2077, Madden 21, and FIFA 21. However, will feature a time-limited system, and NBA 2K21 won't support smart delivery at all, which we reported on a while ago. One final complaint, and this is mostly a matter of personal opinion, is that the Xbox Series X really is practical to it, or is that. Let me. I don't know why I'm stumbling over this. Is that the Xbox Series X really is practical to a fault. Microsoft's push to fully integrate it with the Xbox One makes it feel like an extension of the previous console generation rather than a fresh start. Convenient, but also kind of boring. Swapping between the Xbox Series X and the Xbox One X, they barely even changed the name, is an exercise in deja vu. They even have the same dashboard. This won't matter as much once the games start to arrive, but it does underscore the Xbox Series X's weakness elsewhere, especially in the area of the launch lineup. On more than one occasion, I found myself wondering, quote, is this really it? I'll grant that not every console needs to be a weird art mural, but if I'm going to spend $500 on a new device in the middle of a major recession, it helps to feel more excited about it. So we've kind of talked about how we personally seem to find Microsoft's UI's decision to remain pretty much unchanged across both gens pretty positive for the most part. We were pretty much happy with the, ability to kind of go cross console to console and have the same, loadout with it, akin to, once again, PC gaming. You have Windows, and it's Windows across everything. But Quick Resume still is kind of, for me at least, a bit of a shoulder shrug. So, Mike, kind of given how quickly the SSD is, how often am I really going to find myself swapping between games? Especially, like I said, with how quick that SSD is. The whole point of it is fast load times and whatnot. Is the Quick Resume feature going to make that much of a bigger dent? Like, don't get me wrong, it's a nice feature to have, but especially too if it's delayed for all of your quote unquote next gen games off the bat, that's kind of not necessarily a ringing endorsement right off the bat. But do you kind of find it light as a staple feature for this console, a big marketing push? Do you kind of find this light a little bit with it? And also too, smart delivery, do we think this might be become a problematic thing for third party publishers over the next few years as consumers more transfer over? The first couple years, 2-3 years, are going to be that transfer period to the new console generation for a lot of people. Are we going to kind of run into that too?
Yeah, I definitely think the the quick resume feature,
Mm-hmm.
it's a bummer that it's gonna be patched post release, but I think it is important that they get the console out, because it's not something to like. They're obviously not going to delay the console for something so small.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see it obviously fully functioning, but if they just need to work through a few kinks, that's cool with me. Just as long as they get it fixed upon release. As far as the smart delivery feature, that is a little bit concerning to me, as far as, like you said, for smaller publishers and things of that nature, because this show we've gone to bat a lot for smaller publishers, indie devs, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I am concerned for them, because you would like to see them have just as much access as anyone else to that type of thing. It's tough, because it's all a bunch of speculation right now, and I feel like as the closer we get, I feel like we've been speculating on things, since like the outset of the show. We kind of knew that there were new consoles coming, and we have been, kind of shooting the bull on what could be coming down the pipe for a very long time. And then when we first heard about smart or quick resume and smart delivery and things of that nature, we were really excited about it. I just like at this point, to me, I'm just that type of person that the features that it seems like Microsoft is really focusing on are features that I don't really care about almost in a weird way. You know what I mean?
No,
And that's
definitely.
not to say like it's not awesome or other people won't enjoy them thoroughly, but I'm just not going to be like, wow, this quick resume's awesome. I'm so glad I rage quit NHL and got on Halo in 3 seconds. Like that's just not gonna be me. But other people that might swap games a lot, or even like if you fire the console back up after a break, like say you're like playing and you have to go run an errand, like cut the grass or do something like that.
Mhm.
And then, with quick resume, all of a sudden you can just hop back into the game with very little wait. I mean, every second is precious to everyone. So that is pretty sweet. I just hope that everyone enjoys it more than I'm going to enjoy it, just simply because I'm not gonna. And that's not to say it's not a really cool feature. It's just something I'm not going to use a lot.
Yeah, no, and see, I'm kind of there too, which, like, I get it. It's good for people who, hey, this is the only way they get their video games, which is a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, and I always kind of go to bat for the casual consumer who, hey, like we talk about usually, the people who is the mass majority are the people who, hey, I buy Madden and Call of Duty every year, and that's probably the only games I buy. Those are the bigger demographic probably that publishers do see, that console manufacturers do see, that hey, maybe they, when they have these couple games that they just play, and their Xbox is the only form of video game, of into the medium, I should say, if they have access to, cool, that might work for them a little bit better, where we at the enthusiast level who play on multiple things, and probably our audience as well, I don't know how applicable that is going to be to a lot of people. I don't know how many people are just bouncing back and forth between games nonstop like that. Sure, I have times where I have what I like to call gaming ADD, where it's like I can't find something I want to play. Like I'm bouncing between things all the like, man, I want to play something, but nothing's sticking. Like I'm in the mood to play video games, but I can't find something that sticks with me. But at the same time, like, to me, especially if we're talking, like, and this is just from, and I'm sure, Mike, you could attest to this, playing on PC and having SSD technology, like, a lot of our games that we load into are quick. It's all quick. It loads in simply, as that already with the SSDs, that I don't find that to be necessarily something that, the quick resume is great. I guess I could start it up and, hey, if I just pop out of a game, and you can come back to it. And when they say that, it really is, hey, it's a save state that I can unplug the console, do a full power down, plug it back in, and pick up and open the game right back up where I left off. That is dope. That is really fucking cool. I just don't see it being implemented outside of that, because most of the time I'm probably just going to exit out of the game because I'm done playing it for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. Like, I just don't see myself, and I don't see a lot of people really kind of bouncing back and forth like that to a degree. But outside of that too, on smart delivery, at least I find that to be something that's going to be a little more problematic than obviously quick resume. Quick resume, I think, will just be something that is cool for the first couple years, and then after that, it might be something that doesn't become as emphasized. But smart delivery is something that I think is going to be one of those talking points over the next year or two as we transition into these new consoles, that where we see cross-gen titles, which when we see people, hey, I want to play Cyberpunk, and they go and pick up Cyberpunk, they don't have to worry about, hey, I wanted to wait and buy the next gen version of it. Well, no, you could take this version with you, and you're going to get whatever update comes with it down the line. You're automatically going to get the best textures or whatever included with it, and the Xbox is smart enough to know to load those textures in because of the console you're playing on. That's dope. I worry about the actual third-party publishing pushback with it, with your Maddens, with your FIFAs, with your 2Ks. Like, I'm worried about those those publishers who know those titles, like Madden's, like the sports games, like Call of Duties, that they sell gangbusters, are the best-selling games year after year after year, year after year, that, you know, they're more worried about at times the amount of copies they sell. And I don't think that's a stretch to really say that. They're more worried about, you know, when you think of the corporate life within gaming, you think of your Activision, you think of your EAs that are worried about, hey, what's our fiscal numbers for this year, or for this fiscal year? What are, how many units have we shipped? How many units have we sold? We're worried about that they'll greenlight and, cancel games based on whether how one game sells. And I think that's to a degree a lot of, studios, but more so on the publishing and a big, AAA third-party publishers, you see that more and more, that, hey, it didn't sell well, so it isn't getting a sequel, no matter how good it reviewed. So for those, how is that going to transition? How is that going to work long-term? Are we going to worry about, hey, okay, CD Projekt Red's dope when it comes to supposedly fan service, and they're giving, making sure, hey, all of our content, no matter what, post-launch is free, it's included. You're getting the best textures with it, no matter what you play on. If you're playing on the new next-gen consoles, we're going to have a next-gen version when it's available. You're getting it for free, yada, yada. We support smart delivery, all that jazz. But then you get an EA with Madden, NHL, whatever, and that may not be the case. So I'm really curious. That's probably my biggest question mark. I'm not worried about, and we're going to talk about games and whatnot, right after this, but my biggest worry is probably that. That's my biggest question heading into next gen. Not SSDs, really. It's smart delivery and how that's going to be implemented, at least within the beginning of this console generation. How that's actually going to hold up, how that is actually going to be implemented within the first couple years of this, if that actually is going to be a sticking point. So, and if Microsoft's going to push back a little bit and say, well, if you want to be on our consoles, you got to do this. But then at the same time, they also know, shit, that's a lot of money we're losing out on if we don't let them on our consoles. So it's going to be, that is probably the most interesting thing I'm curious to see about. But Mike, as we begin to kind of round out our review roundup, let's talk about games. Let's kind of round it out here with the games, at least whenever we're talking about the Series X here. And this comes from Ars Technica's review by Sam Makovich. Sorry. And as always, link in the description. The big honking catch for everything that impresses about the Xbox Series is the lack of software. I can point to this holiday season that screams, quote, next gen. In some cases, we're held back by embargoes about mentioning games outright. In other cases, like for Dirt 5, Microsoft reps swooped in at the last minute and told us we're no longer allowed to describe its performance in today's console review, since the version reaching players will potentially fix performance issues we've seen up until this point. And then there are major launch window, quote, optimized versions of games that we simply haven't played yet, particularly next-gen sports fairs like Madden 21 and NBA 2K21. And both of those seem poised to deliver levels of player and world detail that was impossible in previous console generations. Today's embargo lift of a console review without matching gotta spend $4.99 games doesn't seem like an accident, at least not in the wake of Halo Infinite getting bumped to 2021 supposedly. The best stuff I was able to test happens to be part of Game Pass, a service like Microsoft that Microsoft talks about so much that you swear they were dating by now. And if you skip the Xbox One generation, the Series X best optimized games are a good reason to dive into the subscription service. So the launch lineup has obviously been one of our biggest talking points in this lead up to the launch of the console, with us agreeing that it's just absolutely belligerently clear how big of a role Halo Infinite was supposed to play in this. The whole is just absolutely astronomical, huge, and it's just a story unto itself. I'm actually writing an article for a publication that is kind of centered around that, so that'll be coming out next week. I'm sure I'll talk about it then, but so does access to such a huge backlog of titles that we're getting on day one, I mean, anybody who has access to an Xbox Series X or S and has a Game Pass subscription, all those games are playable day one as soon as you get on there. All of them, all backwards compatible supported games on Xbox One are supported on Series X. So that's huge. That is big. But is it such a huge, having such a huge backlog of titles with improvements, as well as, you're getting some new third-party content like the sports games and things like that, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, the like, such as that, Yakuza Zero or Yakuza Like a Dragon, you know, for what looks like to already kind of put that console at a disadvantage for not having that first-party content. Is that such a big disadvantage that we're seeing, or will Game Pass kind of still justify that purchase for early adopters? Do you really think that not having that, hey, this is that big first party title that, this is what you want to buy this system for, that you can't get with a PlayStation, on a PC, whatever? And well, granted, I guess that's a moot point since all Xbox games come to PC, but you get what I'm saying, that it's a console exclusive game that, hey, this is, outside of everything, this is a reason why I'm buying this game, because I can't play it anywhere else. Do you think, having that backlog of catalog that you have justifies that makeup for that, I guess?
That's personally, I do. I think it's something that's like kind of like the beauty is in the eye of the beholder type conversation, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be case by case basis, like with most of this conversation that we're having. But for my case in this situation, I do think that the backlog of games and just kind of what all they're able to do with the backwards compatibility and the Game Pass and everything, I do think that it justifies the purchase. Um, $15 for that backlog and Xbox Live is basically one of the best, values in gaming, because I am used to paying for Xbox Live. Now, people who aren't used to paying for Xbox Live, people who might have had PlayStation Online or are used to PC games where they don't have to pay for an online service, they might not agree with me, and they're completely okay to not agree with me. I'm not going to pretend like they're idiots for expecting better value all the time, but for me, it's just something that I'm used to paying $60 a year for Xbox Live as it is. So you're going to give it to me free and give me games, like that's a pretty good deal to me. I don't know necessarily about the thing that gets tricky for me is like, how much better is Madden 21 really going to be on the new console? NHL 21 isn't even going to be on the new console. Like, there's a lot of question marks out there that I, feel are questionable, and I know you feel are questionable, and I know a lot of our listeners feel are questionable. It does feel like Microsoft might be getting their wagons hitched to the wrong horses at times, and they're getting excited about things that most people probably are looking at it and saying, like, you're really that excited about it, or you're really that pumped about that one little thing there. I am overall excited for the new generation. And I know everyone is, and I know you are. I'm not saying that you're not or anything of the nature, but it does feel like um, it's just really tough, because I'm trying to answer it from an objective point of view, but I don't think that this question is meant to really be objective, in my opinion. I do feel like my experience or my case with it is going to be 100% like, I can see that it's worthwhile just based on having that backlog, hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm pretty much like, I'm the my opinion on this stuff is going to probably be really different from most people's, because I don't have a huge backlog of games per se, and I don't have a huge I'm not a big, like, I am a single player guy, but it has to be the right experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Which is totally fine.
yeah, I'm really into online competitive experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
games like, these backlogs, I'll probably never work my way through them, but I guess it just depends on what it is and where it's at. Like when Ninja Gaiden Black was on there, I was so pumped because I just want everyone to experience it. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's my answer. It just depends, and I think that there is value to be had there, and I really hope that internet speeds and the load times and everything, it all coagulates and works together to make these experiences great for people, because I do think that that's the big differentiator. Like, how fast is your internet? Are you able to stream these games? Are you able to download them in a quick in a quick period of time?
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff comes to mind whenever you're talking about this.
No, definitely, and I agree to an extent with it. I definitely think there's it hurts not having Halo Infinite there. Clearly, I mean that's such a huge blow. That game was set up to be potentially, hey, this is they're marketing it towards, whether that comes to fruition or not. Like this is hopefully that reinvention of Halo, of it becoming a modern thing again, yada yada, and hopefully we do still get that. But that not being there at the launch of this console hurts in more than one way with both the game and the actual console itself. But outside of that, there was a ton to fucking play on this game. And there's you play, like you said, you play a certain stable of games. You'll get into different ones, but when you play those games, you dig deep into them. But for people like me who do play, like to play a variety of stuff, Game Pass is fucking great. And, it's great to have that ability to, okay, I know when I turn that console on, I have access to literally hundreds of games, thousands of games technically with, actual backwards compatible stuff that I own physically, that I don't have to worry about. Like, I can just jump right in there, day one, boom. Like, it's there. It does hurt, though, that, hey, we don't have another game. Like, I don't have, I'm so excited to play my PlayStation 5 because there's Miles Morales. I can jump right in there. Spider-Man on PS4 was one of my favorite games this generation, like top 3, probably. That I'm so excited to just get more of that and jump in and play that and play an extension of that. That's pushing me to get a PS5 early. I mean, granted, I'm just, balls deep into the I'm a student of the game at this point, that I'm there day one probably. I'm a sucker for that shit, but I love new tech like that. So I'm going to be there probably day one as it is already. But point being that that's a big reason why I'm totally cool with paying for that on day one, where, sure, it did, I did double, kind of second guess it for a second, where I'm like, do I really want to get this system day one? Do I need to get it day one? There's not something in terms of the Xbox Series X. But then obviously knowing, oh yeah, we have a fucking, we actually have a show to run, and I'd like to have, some input on that, and us to kind of, share that, use that system between us at times to, do some coverage and whatnot. Obviously, probably should get in that day one. And anyways, two, I'd rather buy it now. I have the money for it now. Get it now, not have to worry about it later. But I digress. In general, I think it's still it's still justifiable. But I think if we did have that one major first party title, it really would make this a no-brainer, I think, for so many more people. And it really would have helped Microsoft off a lot, that first step of like, hey, this is the reason you can only play this in Xbox's ecosystem, and the best way to play it is on an Xbox console, and the new one, being the Xbox Series X or whatever. But I digress. Mike, before we kind of wrap it up here, just wanted to touch on the Series S a little bit, just real quick. With the review roundup, because it's primarily our audience, I think, is leaning towards, if they're getting one, is the X, because it seems to be a more enthusiast crowd, which is great. But I wanted to at least throw this out there, but because the Series S at the same time, releasing the same day, everything, it's part of all of this. And for the most part, reviews have been pretty positive overall. A lot of people are saying, hey, for $300, this is a great secondary console. This is a great, hey, if you're buying a PS5, but you want to get in on Xbox too, but you don't want to spend $500, this is a good option. You're getting, 1440p on this. You're getting all the ability with the fast SSDs, the velocity architecture, the ability to go up to 120 frames per second, all that jazz. You're getting all of that with this console, just not true native 4K, and just clearly there have been some concessions with it a little bit. But, the big concern that I'm seeing with a lot of people, though, is that we now know the system only comes with an incredibly, incredibly small 364 gigabytes of storage on its SSD. Small.
That's usable though, right?
That's usable.
So it probably has a little bit more, but that's all the more you can fit on, like games and stuff.
Well, I think it's a 512 gigabyte SSD, but between the quick resume shit that's baked into there, plus
that's a lot of dead space.
Plus the OS, yeah, that's a lot of dead space. So granted, all of the same storage features and everything are still available with the Series X, on the Series S, I should say, such as being able to use, storage expansions, plus the USB drives for backwards compat stuff, all of that jazz. But with, well over less than half of the space of its big brother's SSD, could we see a lot of buyers' remorse being a storyline for those who purchase this system, thinking, yeah, you know what, this is going to be, I'm cool with getting this, you know, conceding a little bit on the actual performance end of this, you know, cool, I don't need 4K because I'm getting a PS5, I have 4K, or, you know, I'm upgrading my PC, I got a new graphics card, but I do want to play some console games at times. This is good enough for me right now, just so I can play those if I want, or play on Game Pass, yada yada. But do you see a lot of people then turning around saying, shit, I probably should have bought, you know, by the end of this, I'm going to buy another SSD or whatever for this. It's another $100. You know, maybe I should have just spent the $500 and had an all-in-one type of package on there. Do you see a lot of buyer's remorse potentially coming out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I am concerned because it does feel like it's a little bit of a sneak attack almost on the consumer. But
Mm-hmm.
again, if you're going to make the purchase, you need to do a little bit of research on it. And I do feel bad for the parents that are going to go out there and see this versus the Xbox Series X and be
Mm-hmm.
like excited to get their kid this version of the console, but um it it is it's almost it has it's like shades of the Xbox arcade version, almost like how useless that console was.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely feels like that. And again, we know that xCloud and streaming is going to be a big deal, but 320 gigs, and you're talking about Call of Duty being well over 100 gigs itself. You're talking about an entire third of your hard drive space taken up by a single game, which means you're maybe going to be able to get 3 games on there. Like if you have Red Dead 2 and COD on there, like good luck, bud. You're not getting anything else on there. I don't know what to tell you, which is really crazy to think, and it's really something that's a little bit of a concern. But again, this is where the expandable memory like comes into play. How much are they going to charge for it? This is a concern because it's that you could really price gouge at that point in time, because
Mm-hmm.
now all of a sudden you have this console that everyone bought because it's cheap, and now they have to spend $200 on an external hard drive instead of just, they should have maybe just bought a Series X. You know what I mean? We'll see what happens with it, but I do think that buyer's remorse and people getting rid of, or having to return, or even just being stuck with a console is something that could certainly happen, and I could see it really blowing itself out of proportion at first. But again, I think a lot of people will know what they're getting themselves into with the Series S, but there are going to be those people that have no clue, and they're going to be blindsided by it, and that doesn't feel right that should even be an option. You know what I mean?
No, definitely. And it's just sad to see at that point, like, it's just sad to see where at this point, with this kind of tech being provided, that, and it kind of goes back to, oh yeah, this is SSD technology that we're getting into, that, a 500 gigabyte fucking hard disk drive is next to nothing. That it's like, if that's what it came with, that'd be insulting to a lot of people. That'd be like, this console should be $200 at that point. But if we're having it at, we're having an SSD in there, I get it. I understand that this shit isn't cheap, especially in terms of the SSD tech right now, being a custom M.2. Like, I get it. I understand it. But at the same time, a lot of people, I think, are going to be thinking, oh, it's an easy entryway to get into price. I've always been one that I look at it, like when I look at tech like this, that it's like, cool, I'm probably going to be playing this at least for, this system. Maybe they'll have a mid-gen refresh that I might buy or whatever, but this is I'm probably getting anywhere from 3 or 4 to 7 years out of this console. I don't want to skimp out on it. That it's like buying a car almost. That it's like, man, you don't want to spend $20,000 on a car and not get everything you wanted out of it when you could have spent maybe 21, 22 on it. And yeah, you're paying, an extra $10 a month or whatever. At the end of the day, it equals out to 10, $20 or whatever, but you get everything you want. Instead of having to go back and invest in that on the back end and go through all the trouble doing that it's more, man, I should have bought that. I should have went bigger. I should have got the bigger TV. I should have done something like that. Or it's stuff like that that's like, I'm more on that end of, I don't want to skimp out on that, and I'd rather have that and get the most out of it and know that my money went towards the most than I wasn't just necessarily skimping out. And sometimes, obviously going cheaper, you don't buy shit that you don't need to or whatever if you don't feel you're going to use it or whatever. And it is still a good option for people who are just wanting, the secondary device or the secondary way of playing games, if they want to play console games or whatever. I see this being, though, if I see this being the device though that when xCloud eventually does come to consoles, this being, where this could potentially see its big boom compared to the Series X. So if that happens and xCloud, tears it up on there and people are streaming the games and it works just as good as it does on mobile and everything, cool. Then I don't think this is an issue. But up until then, if it's somebody who's buying just traditional games digitally or whatever, it's going to be iffy. So with that being said, Mike, that's kind of it for the rumor roundup. Overall, last thing before we kind of wrap up the show, where do we stand heading into next gen's launch? Do you feel confident in the product that Microsoft's kind of, plan to put out on Tuesday? And, from what we've gone through today, our discussion, even leading up to the console over the past couple months, any last minute predictions or anything you want to kind of, jump in there? What's your overall thoughts on the console heading into next week?
Am a little concerned, just because it doesn't feel like it has that big hitter that's like gonna really push it. I do think that the prospect of Cyberpunk is still going to push the sales up. I do feel like people are still going to buy it because that game is coming very soon. So I do think that it's going to do okay for that sense. But overall, without Halo coming out and everything, it is going to feel like a huge blow. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I wish they would have come out with Halo. I wish it would have been there to really help prop it up. But I am a little sad and I am a little concerned with the numbers in general. But again, like I said, with Cyberpunk coming out, it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. But it does feel like if Halo was there, it would be a huge difference.
No, definitely. I'm right there with you. I am cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of really great things, and I think people who, kind of like us, who are already in the Xbox ecosystem, it's kind of, hey, status quo, only better, for the most part. Like, this only improves the great things that we've already been talking about for how long, about Game Pass and having access to, the highest end of console tech and stuff like that. That's all great, and that's only gonna get better investing in the system. But my biggest thing is just this launch lineup. It's missing that one big title that, man, this is the reason to buy this console. This is the reason to invest $500. Like, Kat Bailey said in her review, this is the reason that you're spending this money in a recession currently, in a bad economy that people are, sometimes right now they're cutting back on a lot of their, external spending and leaving and their disposable income and whatnot. They're spending $500, it better be worth it to them, type of thing. And hopefully, Microsoft puts out this product, and it is for a lot of people, but I think a lot of people would feel a lot more confident if Halo Infinite would have, actually hit its release date and wasn't bumped. But, that's a conversation for a different time. Obviously, we've had that before, and we'll continue having that until it's released, I'm sure. But, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm excited to get this console. I'm excited to give the tech. I'm excited to, go through a review next week of it for, hopefully both of us. And, we'll go from there. But I'm cautiously optimistic. Just wishing there was, like you said, more day one for us to go on in terms of first party content. But Mike, let's end the party chat before we wrap up the episode here. If you're new to the show, party chat is where we propose one question at the end of each week that we want to discuss. Could be as simple as what's your favorite story beat in the game, what you've been playing during quarantine, this whole fucking pandemic mess, or could be a little more in depth as to why the negative stigma around gaming still exists, things like that. And after answering it ourselves, we'll kick it over to you to tweet or email your responses to us over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast, and we'll read some of the responses the following week. Last week's question: if you could change one thing about the current state of Xbox, what would it be? And Eric F. wrote an email into us. It's kind of a boomer way to say it. Emailed into us. I don't know. He just said simply, first party titles of depth and quality, plain and simple. Can't argue that they're too much either, Eric. Hopefully we get some of that heading into the next gen, which definitely will be. Sooner or later we'll get there. Mike, this week's question: what will the difference between sales of the Xbox Series X and S be after its first month on the market? I'm looking at like percentage. So on 100% pie, what do you think percentage-wise of that 100% equaling the total of those two consoles? What's the X going to be and what's the S going to be?
66-30. Wait, what would it be? 66-34 is what I'm going to go with. I think 66-34. 66 would be the Series X, 34 the Series S. I think that if you're saying within the first month, right?
Yeah.
I think that the people that are buying it right off the gate, it could actually even be more. I'll go 70 30. Yeah, that's what I'm going to go with, just because I feel like if you're buying the Series X upon release month, if you're buying the new Xbox on the release month, you're buying the Series X.
No, I'm right there with you. I was going to say 80-20. I even think that's a little generous. But
yeah, I mean, I could even see it going 85-15, to be
yeah.
honest.
And that's no knock against the Series S. I just see that being the one that, hey, on, even Black Friday, and I know that's still kind of in the window, but the sales will probably register for the next month type of thing, that I could totally see that being, this, after the dust has settled for the initial push of that being the, I got money for Christmas. Oh, $300, boom, I could go do that, type of thing. I could see that being where this system comes in a little bit better, but right off the bat, we talk about this all the time, where it's the enthusiasts are the one who are buying this console right off the bat. They're the ones who are investing on launch day, and traditionally they're the ones who are willing to spend the more money to get in right off the bat. So they're probably going to buy the Xbox, Series X comparatively. They're going to want something like that if they're in the know at that point. So I agree. I'll be generous. I'll go 80-20. I kind of side with you, even that I could see it 85. But for the sake of this, I will go 80% Series X, 20% Series S. I think I got that right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it for Party Chat. Now it's your turn to write into us and let us know what you think about that question. Go over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Tweet us, even email us too. You could do that at bonusaccessory@gmail. And shoot us an email or tweet letting us know what you think. Maybe you'll get on the show next week. With that being said, Mike, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on the interwebs to talk about everything we talked about, whether it's the Xbox Series X and how we think it's going to pan out, or all the shit we talked about with Bethesda and Starfield and all that jazz. Where can people find you on the interwebs to talk about all the nerdy video game news we got to know?
You can find me on Twitter at TOYSXLDIER, or you can find me on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier. Feel free to slide through either one of those mediums and let me know how you're feeling. Yeah, that's about it.
And as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including at Twitter, or at Travelus _ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_ on Twitter. You can also find me streaming from time to time on twitch.tv/Travelus_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some video games with me, you can do so over on Xbox Live at just regular Travelus. That's TRAVLESS, no underscore. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz wherever you get a podcast at, and follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways, including our Cyberpunk one that we're doing right now over on Twitter. You can win a free copy of Cyberpunk 2077 when it drops next month. All you got to do is go over to our Twitter, retweet the pin tweet that we have, follow us, and tag a friend that you want to play the game with. So go over there, check that out. With that being said, Mike, that's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening, sharing, and being a part of our growing community. Game on, wash your fucking hands, listen to Doctors Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.